What happens when the second most powerful man in medieval England betrays too many people, climbs too high, and flies too close to the royal sun? On a cold November day in 1326, a brutal public execution would answer that question, with blood, fire, and a scream that would echo through history. November 24th, 1326. The town square of Hereford, England, is alive with a restless crowd. Nobles in fine robes, clergymen with solemn faces, and commoners muddy from travel all jostle for a glimpse. At the heart of the crowd rises a grim wooden platform, the stage for a grotesque spectacle. Guards escort a frail man of around 40 to the scaffold. His once luxurious garments hang in tatters. His cheeks are sunken from refusing food. Just years before, he held power second only to the king. Today, his name will be etched in infamy. Hugh Despenser the Younger, once Edward II's right hand and perhaps something more. Within hours, this man's shattered body would serve as a warning. Seize too much power and you won't just fall, you'll be torn apart. To understand how Hugh met such a grisly end, we must trace the web of ambition, lust, and betrayal woven through 14th century England. Hugh Despenser was born around 1286, the son of a noble household. His father, Hugh the Elder, was a trusted ally of King Edward I. His mother, Isabel Beauchamp, was a member of one of the most powerful families in the land. From the beginning, young Hugh was destined for prominence. When Edward II ascended the throne in 1307, he quickly drew criticism for surrounding himself with male favorites, men who were not only close to him emotionally, but who seemed to influence his every decision. His first favorite, Piers Gaveston, had scandalized the court. When Gaveston was executed by angry nobles in 1312, a vacancy opened beside the throne. Hugh Despenser seized it. By 1316, he had earned the king's trust and was named Royal Chamberlain, a post that gave him near unlimited access to Edward. That same year, Hugh married Eleanor de Clare, Edward's niece, a move that brought him both wealth and the lordship of Glamorgan in Wales. As Edward's affections for Hugh deepened, so too did the favorite's hunger for land, money, and influence. Hugh used his position to seize properties, displace widows, and even rob his own in-laws of their inheritance. He bent laws, intimidated nobles, and turned the king's authority into a tool of personal gain. When exiled in 1321 during a revolt, Hugh went full rogue, turning to piracy, attacking English trade ships like a medieval gangster. But once Edward regained power, Hugh returned and tightened his grip even further. From 1322 to 1326, Hugh and his father effectively were the government. He controlled court access, treasury funds, and vast swaths of land. Chroniclers wrote that he was king in all but name. But while his power grew, so did rumors, especially about his relationship with Edward. Though married with children, many believed Hugh and the king shared a romantic bond. In medieval England, such relationships weren't just taboo, they were seen as an affront to divine order. The church called it sodomy, the nobility called it treason. And Queen Isabella, she called it personal betrayal. Isabella, daughter of the King of France, found herself sidelined, stripped of influence, lands, and even custody of her children, whom Hugh handed over to his wife. In 1324, Hugh even imprisoned members of Isabella's household and seized her estates. Her fury burned quietly until it found a match. In 1325, Isabella was sent to France on a diplomatic mission. There, she reunited with a fugitive noble, Roger Mortimer. Once imprisoned for opposing the Despensers, Mortimer had escaped and fled abroad. Now, he and Isabella became lovers and conspirators. In September 1326, they returned to England with a mercenary army. What followed shocked everyone, including Edward and Hugh. The invasion was swift. The nobility, long humiliated and extorted by Hugh, rallied behind Isabella. The royal grip collapsed almost overnight. The Despensers and the king fled west, carrying the royal treasury with them. But they couldn't outrun their enemies. Hugh the Elder was captured in Bristol and executed with brutal haste, hanged in armor, beheaded, and dismembered. His limbs were left for the dogs. Edward and Hugh the Younger continued their escape into Wales. But nearly abandoned and exhausted, they were captured near Neath in November. Edward would be dethroned. Hugh would face something worse. What kind of crime earns you one of the most gruesome deaths in English history? For Hugh Despenser, the trial was merely a formality, but his sentence was pure horror. After days of starvation and a failed suicide attempt, Hugh was dragged before a tribunal in Hereford. Presiding over his fate, Queen Isabella, Roger Mortimer, and the nobles he had terrorized. He was charged with treason, corruption, theft, and warping the king's will. The court took pains to stage a legal procedure, but no one doubted the verdict. He was guilty before the trial began. On November 24th, before a swelling crowd, Hugh was tied to a tall ladder for all to see. A mock crown of nettles was placed on his head, a twisted parody of the royalty he had abused. Biblical curses were written on his skin. Then the torment began. According to chroniclers, his genitals were cut off and burned before his eyes, a punishment symbolically tied to the rumors of his sexual relationship with Edward. While still alive, his stomach was slit open and his entrails pulled out and set ablaze. Witnesses say his screams were unearthly, echoing through the square as the crowd cheered. Only after this agony was he finally hanged. But the humiliation didn't end there. His body was beheaded, quartered, and sent to 4 cities as a warning. His head was mounted on London's gate, a grim sign of what happens to those who overreach. The spectacle was meant to do more than punish. It was revenge for Hugh's years of cruelty, a public purge of the king's corrupt influence, and a clear statement: some sins would not be tolerated. 4 years later, in 1330, Hugh's widow, Eleanor, was permitted to collect what was left of him: his head, a leg bone, and scattered remains. It was a small coffin for a man who had once towered over England. Edward III fared no better. After being forced to abdicate in favor of his son, Edward II, he was held captive. In 1327, he was murdered at Berkeley Castle. Legend says a red-hot poker was used, inserted in a way to leave no visible mark, a cruel echo of his rumored desires. Though debated by historians, the symbolism was unmistakable. His death, like Hugh's, was laced with poetic horror. We often think of medieval justice as harsh, but was Hugh Despenser's execution about law or theater? Was it punishment or performance? Hugh's rise and fall marked one of the most volatile chapters in England's history. For centuries, his legacy was colored by hatred, painted as a greedy villain and immoral corrupter of the king. But modern historians view things more critically. While Hugh was undoubtedly ruthless and greedy, accusations of sexual deviance were likely political weapons, tools to destroy reputations, not reflections of truth. His end was a message, yes, but also a mirror, a reflection of the fragile dance between power, desire, and public opinion. In a brutal irony, those who brought him down, Isabella and Mortimer, would also fall. By 1330, young Edward seized control. Mortimer was hanged as a traitor, though spared the tortures he had inflicted. The wheel of fortune turned once again. 7 centuries later, Hugh Despenser remains a symbol of unchecked ambition and its catastrophic price. Voted one of the worst Britons of the 14th century, his story has inspired books, plays, and shows. Today, we remember not just the brutality of his death, but the cautionary tale of his life. Because even now, in the corridors of power and influence, echoes of Hugh Despenser still whisper. History isn't always written in ink. Sometimes it's carved into flesh and fire. If you want more true stories that are stranger and darker than fiction, make sure to subscribe.